paid $3,000 for that. Best I can do is $1,000. Much pop those.
How often do you? No, for the whole
Oh,
department.
every year, sometimes twice a year,
Yeah.
you know,
You
I
think,
have the twice last year, because the hires came
Yeah.
times. I sent them over to, photo studio, they get their photos through ID, and then I have them inserted. into,
Oh,
to
okay.
department, 'cause we're not all standing there together.
yeah.
We'll take it down. Just, keeps updating, there's a fresh one in there already, and another one coming.
Awesome.
2021.
Well, we got 1 minute.
Rising mountain.
Probably the longest minute of the whole day. I played Jeopardy song one time. Do.
Bad this one.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I don't know what's that.
Ten seconds.
Five. The study session of March 25th is called to order. Donna, you do a roll call, please.
I will. Councilmember Blush.
Here.
Councilmember Stearns. Here. Councilmember Gilmore.
Dude.
Mayor Nesco.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sherman. Here. Councilmember Sapp. Here. And Councilmember Gutierrez.
Here. Thank you, Donna. All right, tonight's study session, Police Chief Chris Costad is going to share the Police Department Annual Report with us. It's been a long day for me, so sometime today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and council members. Appreciate the time tonight to go over the 2024 annual report. We do this on a yearly basis. And I'd like to thank our records clerk, Sarah Childer. She's the one that basically gets all this together for me and takes a lot of man hours. I had to put her with the pressure cooker this year, told her I wanted in the first quarter. So I'll give it to he in a reasonable time, and then Captain Down Patton is responsible for our professional standards report. So I thank them both for the hard work that they do to get these together for us. I'd like to start with our annual budget of last year. It was $4.1 million. We ended up coming in about last report, our full budget report was in mid-January. We came in about $250,000 under budget for last year. That's primarily due to us being understaffed by 2 officers at their time. So that's we realize this significant savings when we're understaffed. But also I'd like to point out that our overtime cuts for last year were significant as well as compared to 2023. 2024, we came in under budget on overtime for $46,000. In 2023, we're actually $28,000 over budget. So that's due to that's due to a few programs that will be elicited with our corporals that I'll get into and replacing some of our overtime that sergeants accrue with the corporals instead of getting other high price supervisors that are also. We have some less criminal activity that tends to generate more overtime hours. So that little bit, I'll explain that later as we go. Last year we had 12,588 calls for service. Previous year was 13,212, so not a significant difference there. One calls for service, which is included for those calls to service. The 465 versus the 301 in 2023. Last year we had 17 commissioned officers and 2 employees. 3 of those officers were brand new officers coming out of the academy and off the road. So we were substantially low on our numbers. And a little recognition for 2 of our employees who reached their 5 years of service, Sergeant Diaz and our other records clerk, Sam Gaino, with 5 years of service last year. Here's just some.
Really quick, can you,
And-
I'm confused about the calls for service and 911 calls.
Sure.
For service, what's,
The calls for service are the total calls for service, and 465 of those calls are gonna be a 911 call. Does that make sense?
So they might come from non-emergency or other calls. that-
Correct, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Got it.
That makes sense. Just a few stats here for patrol. Again, our calls for service. Last year, you'll notice that we had 645 arrests versus 520 arrests in 2023. And then also the citations issued last year was significantly more, 637 versus 364 in 2023. You'll tend to notice trends like that, especially when you start getting younger new police officers in the job. They want to go out there and just, make contacts and make arrests and do their job. They're happy to do it, they love to do it. So that's why you see those spiking numbers. We have 2 guys in a field training program last year, and you can just see stats just skyrocket, there because they're just out there constantly working and learning the job. Calls per day is pretty, it's pretty on par. We get about 34 calls per day. Let's split between 2 shifts, which will be, 2 at minimum, maybe three officers per shift. So at most you have about 6 guys split up those, at minimum 4. That the previous year was 36, and I think it was 33 the year before that, and 30. So we're pretty stagnant on those numbers. Those are pretty close as one really. 1,669 reports written versus 2023 and 1,654. So we're just kind of right on par. Numbers are staying very close to each other. Here's more statistics. Reference burglaries and trespasses. Burglaries was we increased a little bit since last year. Everything else is pretty much staying right on par. Our detectives division, they handle all the major crimes that follow up. So when officers are out on patrol, they come across a situation where they don't have the time or the ability to finish that case there, and so they need further investigation. And obviously, write a report up and forward that on to our detectives division, and then they will take over those investigations. Last year they had 1 arson, they had 21 burglaries. Forgeries were up a little bit last year. One notable thing is we had no homicides last year. We had that happening quite a few, so that's probably one reason why we did so well over time last year, because those really start to hit us hard in the pocketbook when it comes to what happens, that there's so much time involved with those multiple resources from our agency alone, and that really puts our company at risk. So I think that's one reason why we're able to save so much in overtime this year. Detective Gettle is part of ICAC, which is the Internet Child Against Children team, and it's the lead agency on that, Seattle PD. He's been investigating with that team for over a year now on special training, special equipment programs he gets to use. So they did an investigation last March, and where there was subject who was possibly in possession of explicit pictures involving minors, and he with all the warrants, he contacted Seattle PD. They came out, brought their team out, they executed the warrants, and they will make the arrest, seize all the evidence, and they got a deal with the evidence. It was a great case. It really showed how this whole that team works together, because they come from all agencies on the side of the state. It's great that now people get involved in these types of investigations and now. So very grateful that we get free training from them, program, stuff like that, so it's a great program, to be part of, and we just started that last year. SWAT team, we have, last year, we only had one officer on the SWAT team, a Sergeant Moran, he's a sniper on the SWAT team. They responded to, I think they have about four call outs last year. The SWAT team's compromised, the Shell Police Department, Mason County, Sheriff's Office, SWAT and federal police is on it as well. So that they have to do about 20 hours of training per year. And I think Sergeant Brad actually sometimes does whatever this is swaps or a sniper as well. So that's additional training on top of this SWAT training. So, but this year we did add another officer to the SWAT team. So we're glad to be part of that team. It's a valuable experience for officers to get involved in. And, just an experience. Our two canines, Lex and Valor, they did over 200 hours of training last year, over 35 deployments. We work closely with the Mason County Sheriff's Department with our canine program. This year, Lex and Valor will both be retiring, so we have replacement dogs that we're working with right now. Sergeant Diaz will be getting a replacement dog this year. Sergeant Downs will be not moving forward into the canine program anymore. We will be second sergeants, so that one position open. So this year, Detective Jimmy Elbell will be rotating out of detectives, and his currently training will be a canine officer. We're hoping to get the new dogs up. This year, the training with them, we're just kind of waiting for the go ahead from training dogs to actually give them to us. That's just that is in the mix.
And Chief, so our canine program is fully supported by donations from our community, so that is not accounted for in the police department's budget.
The only thing we cover for is actual officers paid, but purchase of the canine, veterinary bills, food, any extra equipment they need, kennels, whatever, that all comes from their canine foundation.
Belgian Malinois, or are they?
What's that?
Are they Belgian Malinois, or are they German Shepherds?
These are German Shepherds. I'm not that great with the dogs. I'm so sorry, but I believe they are.
The Malinois is a typical, yeah.
Yes.
The breed that's used for policing, yes.
Yeah. Some exceptional things that happened this year. There's lots of things happen throughout the year. We get emails all the time for different officers doing great things out in the field and serving their community. Last November, Officer Mullins, who's a paralegal officer with us, responded to an unconscious female. He went and administered her CPR. She was in and out of it. She eventually got resuscitated and transported to the hospital where she survived. We followed up with the fire department and the personnel that were on scene, and they did say that Officer Mullins greatly affected this lady in surviving. So we had a conversation a few weeks ago during one of our leadership meetings about Officer Mullins' actions, and he's been approved for a life-saving award, and bring that forward to you hopefully soon. More ducks in a row that present that from them. So that you know, small and maybe say a few words about his response to that. Another one is June 2024. These ones will stop your heart. Missing child. I remember this one because I went on this one as well. As soon as you hear, missing 1, 2-year-old child, your heart just drops. You go there. This one was out at the turn of 15th or 16th Street out in that somewhere. I remember. Eaglewood, thank you. Yes, it was out there, and within 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, we got 10 officers out there. Trying to establish, what happened. First thing we always do when we go to these calls is we search the house, because that, 5 times out of 10, it's gonna be in the house, hiding, playing games, sleeping. And this is old. It took a little while. I started searching neighbors and so neighbors' residences, and so some of the other officers spanning out to the into the community. But the child was located within Princeton, so it's always a big sigh of relief when, yeah, hey, got a child, he's good, you know, so that was, we got a lot of, recognition for that. Well, we were on scene, we were so grateful that it showed up in numbers and we were resolved very quickly. Another one we had was Officer Pickens. He's just, he's just very, very great with the community. I'm always out there talking with people, just developing those relationships. And he came across some children who wanted to play some basketball, but he didn't do it because of weather. But then he came back another day and brought a football in and played. It took a while. So those are just his mother was very appreciative of his extra effort towards her children. So she let us know that it was just very appreciated. It's just little things like that. We get tons of these stories all year, so it's great.
She posted that on social media too, that was pretty.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, I remember when that happened, yeah.
She was actually here in a council meeting. She's. Wow. Very exciting. So we hired, last year we had 3 officers in the police academy. Officer Green was the last one to graduate. Then down here you have Officer Houston and Officer Mullins. They both graduated last year from the police academy as well. Officer Houston and Mullins have completed their FTO process. They're solo out on their own, and they're mission officers that are out there and just doing what they love to do, and the numbers speak for themselves. Also, with promotions last year, we promoted 3 officers to the corporal's position. The first 2 were Officer Portillo and Officer Antonia. They were patrol officers, and one of the reasons why we wanted to get an extra level of supervision within our ranks is because, like I said previously, with the overtime budget, when a sergeant would take time off on vacation, you'd have to replace that sergeant with another supervisor, and sergeant's rate pays, with the more in a corporal rate of POV, so you can get more flexibility out of corporals, having them do their shifts in the middle of the day, like 12 to 12, and then we can back them up if we needed them to cover a day shift, or we can move forward and have them cover a night shift if the sergeant responds. So that's one way we were able to save a little bit of time this year. And it also gives the opportunity to become a first line supervisor and learn that position. So they help succeed in the future and replacing every service position that we have. So Detective Gettle, you might remember, we just had him in here a couple months ago. He was promoted to corporal. He's in the detectives division, or will remain in the detectives division. I'm currently beating up the personnel in the detectives division right now, so I'll have 2 supervisors and 1 just high level detective. That'll help us not only cover, when we have a major crime, we can get some really quick in these investigations when we have a lot from last year, and we got 2 detectives, and we're relying a lot on the county. It's really hard to keep up with the work. So I added another layer of supervision in there. So Sergeant Downs will be the sergeant of detectives. Detective Kendall will be corporal, and Officer Ford will be coming in shortly and being our line of detective. And what's nice about that is the only ones allowed to go on vacation or be gone at the same time. That way, I always have 2 to respond to the same, and then I'll make it happen. So supervisor there, supervisor. So. And you remember, of course, Officer Gettle was the officer of the year for 2024. He's just he's a go-getter, he's a hard worker, he makes me tired just watching him. He just goes out, he does magnificent work. He's really coming in tune with his position. He's been in the detective's position for a year now. He has over a decade worth of law enforcement experience. And that's really good to propel through his process through detectives and learning his position there. He's doing a great job, and everyone recognizes it. That the officers come in and talk to him and ask him his advice. So and they are the ones who nominated. I just made the decision. It was just this overwhelming. Officer Gettle was the officer to be. And we did quite a few things with community outreach last year, 24 Citizens Academy. Miguel was there quite a bit. It's a great program. Everyone got to, get a little bit of different taste of, different agencies, hands-on, with certain things. Got to learn more about the canines and our policies, procedures. So all in all, great kind of rather thing to try and give you the biggest picture as we can, so hopefully we're gonna do that again this year. We're starting to look at that as a dual effort with us in Mason County. We also had National Night Out on August 26th. We did that on the South Mason Fire in Arcadia. So I was out there and 4 or 5 of my officers were out there, and it's just a good time. Sergeant Diaz did a canine demonstration, the fire personnel did they cut open the car, they can't open their pipe cleaning or something, show them how they did that. And there was a relay race and, food and everything, so it was a great time for everyone to come out and just be with us and meet new people and have a good time. And as always, we always do shop with a cop. Or shop with a hero, as we call it now, because we invite just about anyone who wants to come. Central Mason Fire comes out, Mason County comes out, Washington State Patrol comes out, and Tribal Police came out, so it's great. We hosted, I think, about 28 kids this last year. And for this year also, or this last year, Mason County also hosted some kids. I think they hosted around 15 or so. So we hosted probably pretty close to 50 kids in conjunction with each other. So it was a great event. One of the best things I could do all year. Story time, and I recently did it. Well, recently, back in last summer, I did a story time at the library. Some kids there, just read them a couple books and hung out. Some of the officers came out, there were probably vehicles out there and let them crawl around and kind of see all their equipment. Captain Patton and Sheriff Sperling did an active threat training, much like we had in the Civic Center. We did that last May. And that was just just for the community that whoever wanted to show up. And a lot of grants and donations this year. We received over last year, excuse me, over $148,000 in grants or donations last year. To name some of them, we got $20,400 from the Washington Auto Theft Prevention Authority, and that went to half of our flock cameras. OCCU initially pitched in about over 20,000 for our flock cameras, and then they came back and gave us another 65,000. A little bit later in the year, SBI Sierra Pacific Industries gave us $1,607, and that was for our wrap. The wrap equipment right here, you can see where that is, and that's basic. That's for combative people who were having difficulty containing or transporting. The old school style is kind of bind their legs and hobble tie them. The problem with that is if you put them in the car, it's just asphyxiation. Sorry. And so that's a huge issue for us, and we don't want them to get hurt. So this piece of equipment actually kind of locks them down in kind of a sitting area with their hands to their sides, and then they're almost like in a bag where you can just lift them up and the seats and everything. So it keeps them in an upright position where there's no danger of them so that's what they contributed to. CJTC gave us $41,000. That was for our reaccrediting in 2023. That was the first time they offered this program. Any agency that reaccredited in 2023 was able to apply for this, and we got it. So they gave it to. We're able to put that towards some piece of equipment. And the last one is from the Department of Justice. It's our ballistic vest. Actually, there's another one too. Ballistic vest. forget the name of the term of it, but anyways, it's for ballistic vest for the officers. It lasts for 2 years. They gave us $4,300. It's not enough to last us 2 years, but it definitely helps out as each vest. Have to be replaced every 5 years, and they're running right now about 12 bucks or so on. So we had a couple bodies that really kind of dries that up. So that's through the Department of Justice. And the last one was a K9 money on for Valor. We got a bullet vest and a crew vest. And that's, yeah, that's good as well. I'm gonna skip the professional standards part right now because I'm gonna address that in the next report. Our records division. They're pretty much pretty standard on all their consistent, on all their numbers that they produce from 2024 to 2023. Big ones are the public disclosure requests that can bring a lot of work on them, especially when they're redacting certain pieces of reports or especially the video. I know it takes a while to watch certain things out of the video that we don't want to release. And oh yeah, and our volunteer is Yesenia Hernandez. She volunteered for about the last, I think it was about mid-summer until about November or so, and she donated 42 hours as an records division. She was a student at a local college, and so she was just working on her law enforcement certification, and so she decided to come and give us her time. She was ready to have her. Real quickly, here's our offenses from 24 to 23 to 22. Our numbers are down, especially our murder/homicides. We didn't have any last year, no manslaughters. Our numbers have been increasing for the last several years, so that's good news. Total of the group A crimes against persons 212 versus 284 and 264 the previous years, and the rest of that for those 212 crimes we have arrested 42 of them. I'm sorry. Strike that. And let's see here. Against property, arson, burglary, and all the way down. Again, we're seeing lower numbers than we are in 23 and 22. And if anyone has any questions, I mentioned speaking about any numbers we're seeing or anything, just feel free to interrupt me or ask. Here's our group B offenses. Those are going to be your lower level offenses. Those ones are about the same, maybe a little bit more. Those nothing very significant other than the DUI increase, which is attributed to, again, officers are out there, they're pulling covers over all night, and they're out there doing their job, and they're just coming across the possible DUIs. And that's the end of this report. I'm going to switch over to questions. Oh, right here. There it is. Okay. Sorry, I'm not an IT guy. Okay, this is our 2024 professional standards report. Captain Patton put this together for us. We've been doing these now since about 2018 when we first started accredited. It is something that we have to do for accreditation, and it's great to know where we stand. when it comes to our professional standards, this tells us about our complaints, our internal conditions, pursuits, collisions, use of force and bias policing. For our in complaints or internal affairs, this year we only had 4, and those were just our general complaints with the public. They didn't reach to the level where we needed to do an internal affairs investigation. Out of those 4, 2 of them were not sustained, 1 was sustained, and then 1 was incomplete due to the complainant didn't cooperate with the investigation or recontact us. So that just kind of sits there unless they want to recontact us. So, but as I said, we did not have any internal affairs investigations for the last year. And here you can see what the complaints were about. Places the company fine officer was rude, talking about outcome of the investigation, rude conduct, and then the one sustained one was systems unhappy about the outcome of the investigation. So glad to say that we didn't have any major things last year. I don't even think we had any the year before. The year before, I think we all actually had one system. That's a good generated system. Bias-based policing, every year we do training on bias-based policing. This year, we're pretty in line with how numbers have been ending up over the past few years. There's one exception when it comes to criminal and traffic citations issued to Hispanics. We did see an increase in that this year. Last year, and we had a total of 60 last year, and this year we're at about 148. So we're still looking at that, and we're doing an audit to kind of see how these numbers were derived. Did they come from calls, calls being placed and we respond to them, or did they come from some initiated activities? So we're in the process of that. We're going to check up on that mid-year and kind of see where that lies. Although statistically for the demographics for Shelton, it's pretty on board for percentage. It's 32.2 versus 30. So it is close to demographics, but the numbers did increase this year. So we are looking at that and trying to ascertain if this is just an anomaly or if there's another reason for that. Employee collisions, we only had 2 employee collisions this year. None of them were our fault, so thank God. No injuries, just property damage. Pursuits, as you can see, over the last 3 years, 2022 we only had 2, and 2023 we only had 1. This last year we had 5. That's due to legislative changes in the pursuit laws now. So we can pursue for prior to that, we would have to have probable cause to pursue. Now we only have to have reasonable suspicion again. So now that opens up opportunities for us to continue pursuits a little longer. But I am glad to see that there are officers, even though they may be justified in continuing their pursuits, they are discontinuing. That shows a very good level-headedness and maturity, assessing the situation at hand, saying, hey, this isn't worth it. The violation isn't worth it. It's too busy. It's getting too dangerous. It's getting too fast, and they're calling them off. And I appreciate that. They're making those mature decisions and doing that when necessary. Two of them ended by a collision, and one is spike strip. All of our pursuits this year were within months. And the main reasons for the pursuits here: one was an assault, one was reckless driving. And I can tell you right now, those reckless drivings, they were probably DUI, but we don't know if they're DUI until we get them stopped and we conduct our investigation. So 3 of them that we discontinued, we're calling them reckless because they're driving reckless, but we can't say for sure that they were DUI. We could have continued with the pursuit as a DUI, we chose not. Use of force, we had 21 uses of force over last year. This is a little bit of an uptick of the year before, but it still only lands us with the calls we're going to per year, which is 12,588 last year. We're still landing in the 1% of calls for service that involve use of force. And one thing you gotta remember, just because there's 21 uses of force, doesn't mean there's 21 calls with use of force. There could be, 18 calls, but a couple have multiple suspects involved, so because each one would be use of force, even though it's involved in the same incident, so that can be a determining factor too. And I actually think that was this year, because we had a couple officers go out and there's 4 uses of force in one incident because there's 4 suspects. So that kind of can fluctuate your numbers a little bit. And you see primarily, we're getting uses of force involved with males who are intoxicated or on drugs. That's where most of our involvements. And let me see here, just to wrap it up, we have a continuing recommendation for our officers regarding these particular categories throughout the year, use of force, deadly force, policy refreshers, defensive tactics, lesson weapons training, which actually we're doing yesterday and today, and de-escalation training. So we're always striving to make us the best, most accountable, transparent police department that we can be in. So we continue these trainings, every year. It's just I'll go through and keep giving them everything. I don't.
Questions, comments?
Just 2 comments. First of all, the majority, not even the majority, the vast majority of the feedback I get is about the professionalism and the humanness of our officers. So thank you for creating that culture within the department. And secondly, this is the only town I've lived in or ever just walked around where I'm waving at the police force and they wave back happily instead of me worrying about them turning on me. So just letting you know that you guys are doing a great job, you men and women are doing a great job, and I feel safe in this community. So
I appreciate that, and I noticed that too, even when I'm going down the road and I'm looking at, whatever's going on in the city, I get lots of waves, and it's great to have those interactions and be, one with the community, and, everyone's just talking in person and sharing so much.
Thank you. Thank your officers. Thanks Sarah and Dan for putting a great presentation together, and also I hear a lot of good things about the police force. And I definitely haven't heard any complaints. So, and trust me, if someone wants to complain, they find me in Safeway or
Yes.
Walmart when I'm shopping and I want to get in and out of there. But yeah, thank you and your officers, and great report.
Keep up the great work, guys. Thank you.
All right, you are off the hook. All right, next, Finance Director Mike Givens has some budget information for us. Now the fun stuff. I was being sarcastic. Of course.
I think before Mike gets started, I know we talked about this with council at least once or a couple times. Leading into our 2026 budget formulation, we want to circle back and provide council's budget information as we did. And that is on the heels of adopting the 2025 budget that we accounted for ending fund balance to use to balance the general fund. Obviously, that's not sustainable long term, so we have some decisions to make how we move forward with 26, 27 and beyond. So Mike and his team have done a lot of work to project what that budget looks like for the next 3 years. And this informs the council better on what our kind of service levels are now, what the associated expenditures are with those service levels, what the revenue is to offset those service levels. So we can go into that council retreat on May 5th to really talk about service levels and kind of have the budget numbers kind of behind us. We want to hear the priorities of the council, inform staff, so we can go back to work and develop a budget that meets your service level priorities. So that's the intent tonight, is to further inform you of this budget forecast and the work that's done for you. If you have any questions at any time, feel free. That's why we're here. Hope to better inform you and the public. We talked with the staff this morning about this as well, and we'll continue to talk about staff because this is we're approaching this as a team effort. it's all of us within the city of Shelton, the whole their community, we can come forward with a couple of ideas, when we enter into that retreat, maybe engage our citizenry, as well to, learn about their sort of stuff. So. I'll keep it over to Mike.
Okay, I think you all know when we adopted the 2025 budget, we agreed we were using some ending fund balance. And so this is trying to go after this early, like Mark mentioned, so that, we're not waiting until the last minute and having to make more severe cuts than might be necessary to tackle this earlier. So we've briefed you, I know, on this quite a bit. I don't know. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that because I live in the finance world. I don't know that you can look at this too often, though. I live in it every day. You all don't. So to review just a little bit where our ending fund balance has been. As we mentioned with the monthly report, we added this line through the historical data on our ending fund balance to show that we have a reserved portion that's per council policy, 16% of prior year expenditure. 20% of prior year expenditures in the general fund, water, sewer, and storm fund. And that is really the base level that we use for cash flow purposes. If we take your authorization to use it in case of an emergency with one of the funds or some sort of natural disaster, it could be an economic downturn, but that's where we have below that reddish orange line that appears there. What's above it is unreserved. In other words, that's what we are using in 2025 to balance the budget. And that's that unsustainable portion. We kept doing that, it's eventually going to get down to that reserve line. So, when I was listening to Chief Costed talk about the police budget, some of that is attributed to our unreserved portion, the underspending, the vacancy of officers, underspending overtime. The donations, all those things led to some of this. That's not all of it by any means, but that's a portion of it. So as you hear that, it just reminded me a little bit of how that happened. So it was due to open positions, it was due to revenue coming in, some of it one-time revenue, frankly, that came in higher. As I mentioned, we budget in a revenue in a pretty conservative manner so that we know we're going to achieve that. If conditions stay the same, that's where we want our target to be. And so that's why that sometimes happens. So that's that ending fund balance in the general fund, the reserve per policy. So we're going to talk just a minute about revenue policy.
Well, really quick, so historically, if we weren't in this 5-year forecast downturn in revenue and expenses, obviously, we would use that money for one-time projects to put a roof on the civic center, to do some road work, but at this point, we can't because we need to save it to get us by the next couple of years until we figure out we grow or figure out more revenue
It's
sources.
sustaining operations,
Yes.
right? So we're using more of it for ongoing expenses than what we would prefer
Yeah.
to use. It'd be great to reinvest that in one-time projects, like you said, whether it's facility projects or street projects or community enhancements in some way, yes, but my column says I'm not gonna apologize for the fund balance and
For having savings.
yeah, absolutely right. I think it's the diligence of our staff, decisions the council made that have allowed us to this point, certainly.
And we do have some money set aside in our general resources capital fund. So we do have some for those sorts of things, like a roof replacement and a major capital component of an own building. But as a reminder, we're doing quite a bit of facilities maintenance work this year. We're using some REIT funds and some other capital funds. Trying to think what all those are, and I think I have listed out in here later, but some of them are replacing HVACs at some of our own buildings, not this building, but
Museum.
museum, the library deck. that's happening, that's in cooperation with Timberland Library District, but also grants, so. So taking a look at our revenue forecast, this is something that, again, shows, I think, our conservative approach to budgeting. So our property tax budget, so these are all the revenue sources that comprise the general fund. So property tax doesn't change a whole lot. If, quite honestly, as we grow down the road, we would look for that to increase some. But predicting kind of right now where we're at, we can assume that this is where we'll be. So it's a pretty straightforward line to analyze and predict on. I will say this projection is predicated on the economy staying fairly much like it is, fairly stable. I think we're fortunate to some extent that if the economy recesses, it shouldn't greater in any one area. It's obviously going to affect consumer spending, should a recession come about, those sorts of things. But I think by and large, we don't have that, those more luxury sort of purchases that would cause sales and respects to go. So leading us into sales tax, yes, last year was a pretty strong year. We were over budget. Predicting this year to be a little bit more in line, I kept it flat in the projection. Again, I'd rather be over than under. And just anecdotally, our first 2 months of 2025 were lower than the first 2 months of 2024. Will that continue? I don't know, but I think it bears being a little bit more cautious on that.
Well, it's a little concerning because I was telling Mark today, I mean, that's November, December
Right.
figures, so receipts, so that's Christmas time.
And you know, as I've said, our sales tax a month in the general fund, it's, you know, it's pretty consistent. So when it's lower, you're talking $10,000 or $20,000, but that continues across the year. Obviously, that's something to kind of watch. Our receipts range in those high months around $300,000. It varies, so we'll see. March, which will come in to us from the Department of Revenue next Monday, the last day of the month, and April are typically lower months anyway, because they're the receipts for sales in January, February. But we can still have that comparison. The utility taxes, so based on our city provided utilities and non-city provided utilities stay fairly consistent, but are relational to the rates. So as those might go up, so do the taxes on those. D&O tax in 2023, the council at that time voted to increase the D&O tax effective 2024. So that's the increase you see in revenue there. It didn't increase it a lot for 2025. And as I've explained, we'll just kind of wait and see. I'm hoping I can increase that for 2026 and then it should level out. B&O tax would be volatile to a recessed economy also, obviously, because if businesses are bringing in less, then that's going to be impacted. But I'm hopeful, as you can see, our 2024 revenue came in just over 1.4 million. We're real aggressive. I was real aggressive with increasing it because I wanted more data. If it does come in higher, which I can tell you, the annual filers, of which we have quite a few in the city of Shelton, who paid January for the prior year. It was pretty solid. So we'll see what the rest of the year brings in when we prepare the budget. Something nice. We'll have a little bit of an increase in revenue there. The rest of the categories stay fairly consistent. I reduced our transfers in, and that's that mention I make there, I think, the $476,625 is from library endowment fund and the maintenance projects from the regional funds. That could happen next year if staff determines there are some projects and there's some remaining budget, I know in week 1 and week 2, that's real estate excise tax. Trying to remind you if I don't call out an acronym, because I know we use them a lot, and I want the public and everyone to know what we're talking about here. This is completely transparent, so that's our revenue forecast. You'll notice it goes down a bit next year in forecast because of, we're pulling out that transfer in, but it stays pretty darn consistent. Our revenue, as you look at it, obviously 23 and 24 are the actuals, it just doesn't change a whole lot. Again, in 2024, we got some one-time money in the form of permits, in the form of some grants, and in the form of just going over budget in some areas, utility taxes. So that's our revenue outlook. Taking us forward to the next 2 years for planning. Again, it's predictable, which is a nice thing. It doesn't change a whole lot, but that's revenue. I added a couple of informational slides here. So this is something that appears in the monthly report. It's just to show you and our public, we have a pretty darn balanced revenue pie, which is nice when you're working in a public agency. That's that effect, I think, that if we do experience a downturn, it doesn't just hit one area. If we were completely reliant or largely on property tax, if you have a downturn there, it hits you hard. Here, we have a pretty balanced pie. That other category has our smaller sources, but that's a good thing. I think it helps us plan and have some predictability. Shows what percentage of this is. You know, our biggest places are property tax, sales tax. So that's our revenue picture. Let's take a look. Let me drop this back a little bit. This has a little more data on it. So our expenditures. The expenditures for the general